Hello, and welcome to the latest episode of The Edge. My name is Sam Daddiaco, and today we will be discussing the importance of music education. My guest for today is Paul K. Fox. He is a former music educator for Upper St. Clair. He taught there for over 30 years, and he continues to be their curriculum developer and also is the founding director of the Hills Junior Orchestra. Mr. Fox, it's a pleasure to have you on the show.
Thank you, Sam.
So we are going to start off in talking a little bit about your background and what inspired you to become a music educator in the first place. Okay?
Well, way back, a long time before you were born, I was one of those goobers that would stay in the band room if I could all day long at school. I loved it. I was going to be a doctor all the way up to 9th grade. And my grandmother said, then you'll take care of me when I get old, et cetera, et cetera. And then our science teacher told us we had to take our blood test and find out what our blood type was. And I was so squeamish, I couldn't handle the needles and everything. So I said, well, what do I really want to do? What was my favorite time of day? Band, orchestra, any part of music. So it became real clear to me then, and I had excellent teachers back in Penn Hills, so they kind of inspired me.
All right, so did you have, along the way in your path to music education, did you know from then on that you always aspired to be a music educator? Did you have any regrets or anyone?
Absolutely not. It's the greatest job there is. First of all, you get to work with music. Second of all, you get to work with students who want to be in your class. I mean, how much better could that be? And third, I had people who saw things in me, you could call them mentors, and maybe they were encouraging me to be more of an entrepreneur or public speaker, which I didn't see, or maybe be involved in public relations. I had people even in college that were suggesting I should go in arts administration. And I kept saying, I want to teach music. That is really what makes my day. That's my bucket list. And I even had my viola teacher in college say, well, we're going to prepare you to do auditions. Because I went to Carnegie Mellon, and those auditions, you could become an orchestra player in the Pittsburgh Symphony, for example. I said, no, I want to be a music teacher. I kept going through that. And pretty much my peers knew I was Mr. Music Ed all the way through, as I said, from 9th grade on through college.
All right, so you didn't have any regrets or anything? You wouldn't want to just do it all over again?
Well, I'd love to do it all over again. Now I'm retired.
Yeah.
And I still hold on to announcing for my marching band. And I have a youth orchestra, which you are a member of. You are a drummer in my youth orchestra on Saturdays. But at this point, I mean, if you told me I could go back and be a 20-something-year-old person and go back and through the whole career in music education. Now keep in mind, if you're going to be a music teacher, you have to be ready to do all forms of music. You can't just say, I'm a string person, which is viola was my major. Or you can't just say, I'm a band person. Well, I played tuba. You have to be able to do kindergarten. You have to do rolling around on the floor in primary, doing dancing with the kids. So there were times I was a little surprised. People said, well, now you're the choir director for Upper St. Clair High School. And I said, why would I do that? I didn't sing much in high school choir or college choir. And but it says on your certificate, music, now it will say pre-K through 12. Doesn't say band, doesn't say voice, doesn't say elementary. So you have to be ready to do it all. So some parts of my career I was surprised. I had to do, as I said, high school choir. But since I started high school choir, I got into musicals. And boy, is that fun. And then you get to run quadruple number of kids doing a show like Scrooge or Joseph. And everybody's like, oh, and they're all involved in so many different art forms. No, I have no regrets whatsoever. I didn't see my wife a lot. She was a music teacher too. So the two of us went our ways and then met for dinner and then came back a lot.
So in other words, you can't aspire to be just a choral director or just a band director. You have to know all of it if you want to be a music educator.
You're a
period.
percussionist.
Correct.
You should know piano. You should sing Mr. Parati's choir before you graduate, if you were going to be a music teacher. You should be in the band. You are. You should know the woodwind instruments, the brass instruments, the percussion instruments, piece of cake. And you should be able to teach general music, younger kids. In fact, you should rent yourself out to a church group or community group and say, here, I'll help teach music. I'll teach music history. All of those subjects are part of what your skill set should be when you go out looking for a job to be a music teacher.
All right, that is very insightful information about how you got your career started. Now that we know a little bit about that, let's get to the main topic for today's show, which is the importance of music education in our schools. So let's tackle that. Let's tackle that essential question first and foremost. What is the purpose of music education in school curriculum? Not just in high school curriculums, but also elementary school, middle school, all the way through college.
Well, I can start with what it isn't. All right, everyone will tell you if you take music, you'll be smarter. Well, that's true. The studies show way overboard that if you are very serious about studying music, your SAT scores will go up. In fact, the longer you are taking musical instruments or singing from junior high all the way up to high school, the better your scores will be. That's not a reason to take music. They say that one of the big majors of college, going into from pre-med into medical colleges where they will teach you to be a doctor, you would expect biology and chemistry as being the pre-med majors. Guess what? Music has sometimes been the number one major that the colleges have accepted into music, into becoming a doctor. That's not the reason. That's not a reason to go become in music. Just to make, they tell you pattern recognition, memorization, audio acuity, being able to hear better. Those could be good reasons to be smarter. I have a lot of trouble with this statistics because how do I know that it's music itself that's making you smarter in math? Or is it that a student who's in music just happens to be a little better at any kind of standardized achievement tests or math because you're successful in music? So I don't know the answer to that. The number one reason you go into music or art is creative self-expression. And that's the big, everybody should have a class in their schedule to express themselves.
All right. So how do you think, and you've kind of touched on this a little bit already, but how do you think just studying the arts benefits all students regardless of their fields of pursuit?
Well, you have some ideas that everybody loves being involved in the arts because they can express their inner voice. They can find their identity. We know students want to come to school because they're involved in arts, in music especially. I mean, I wanted to go to school and live in the band room. I would have wanted to play my tuba in the band and my viola in the orchestra at some point, and maybe even play piano in a choir. So the attendance rates go up in the schools. But one of the things, they call it the 4 C's. Music is part of the 4 C's, the 21st century learning skills, which are part of all fields. Creativity, big one. Communication, you have to learn how to communicate. You have to learn how to collaborate with others. You can't be in a band and just sit there by yourself and just play your music. And finally, critical thinking. Critical thinking is one of the most important in all fields. And it's basically talking about working this right brain. I know you can read. I know you can translate even the notes on your page because you do it every Saturday for me. But what about the feelings, the expressiveness, being able to interpret the composer's desires? That's over here. And I don't know if you know the author Daniel Pink. Everybody should read his book. I think it's called Whole Brain, Why Right-Brainers Will Rule the World. Okay, you're going out to find your field. He says, don't go looking for left brain fields. Don't even become an attorney like he was. He says you should be looking for things that can't be scripted. You ever call the 1-800-TECH numbers? And the guy says, okay, check to see if your computer is plugged in. He's reading that off a screen. Find jobs, not even lawyers, Zoom, what's it called? Zoom attorneys. They have different online programs now that help you do a will. No, you should find things that help your imagination, find your voice, your expression, and music does it for me, that's for sure.
I know it has for me too, and it has helped, it really has helped me both with critical thinking and becoming a better student, and also just relieving some of that anxiety going into the school day, knowing that there's something to look forward to, even if you have a test in a class that you're dreading, or you have some situation you're involved in that isn't so comfortable, that you know you can go into the band room or the choir room or wherever it might be and just relieve some stress, which kind of leads me into the next question. Do you see music education as being a vital source of stress relief for teens that are involved with it? I know my perspective on that. Why don't you share yours?
Well, I will also say for music teachers,
yeah.
When you come and you get a group of people together that want to be there, and it's a safe place in the music room. There's nothing absolutely dangerous about going involved in playing or singing, your craft. I've always felt that. I have had students that told me that they got hall passes when they were allowed to go down and practice in the practice room. They felt safest in the entire building. There's no bullying going on. There can't be. And there's opportunities, as I said, for you to find your voice. And you go out of there, and I've always felt very relaxed once I played music, even just for myself, pick up an instrument. It does lower your blood pressure. It does make you relax. That's a good thing.
Definitely, definitely. So, even though music education is what am I trying to say here? That even though it can be seen as a stress reliever, do you see any elements of it that could induce peer pressure of any kind?
Well, there's one area that with our South Hills Junior Orchestra that I caution people. Not everybody should be competitive. Not everyone should be thinking, I need to be first chair. And our youth orchestra that meets at Upper St. Clair High School, how's that for an advertisement real quick on Saturdays, 10:30 to 12:30. Anybody watching this, we'd love to have you come. But our South Hills Junior Orchestra is non-competitive. Some students get wrapped up about, I'm first chair. No, I'm second chair. I want to be first chair. Sometimes there's that kind of peer pressure. But I got to be really honest with you, whenever you get out there in your own career, you're going to have peer pressure. Yeah, I don't care if you sell newspapers or if you run a camera in a studio, you're going to have peer pressure wherever you go in every career. And sometimes it's a good thing. It kind of prods you from behind and say, do better, practice more. But the kind of peer pressure that people I know, students who get almost frozen and unable to do what they wanted to do with music because they're so concerned about competition, that's not good.
I would have to agree with that. I definitely would have to agree with that. I mean, I know people that are in bands that actually go to marching band contests and things, and they say that is a super stressing experience and nobody actually cares about the music they're playing. I kind of feel thankful that...
Well, you're trotting on ground that's a little dangerous.
Yeah.
There are school programs that are highly competitive. You go to Texas, you go to Midwest. There's some in which, and I'm the teacher, I would be stressed out of this. If I got second place this year at the competition, I might be fired next year. You must get first place, Mr. Fox. That sort of thing. I don't see that's why music's around.
Yeah,
there are people, but there's Olympics, and there are kids. My brother was a violinist, and I'll tell you, he was, we're going to the music festival next week. I better get first chair. I better get a high chair. I better beat out so-and-so. To him, that was his whole goal. He ended up becoming a violinist in a symphony. And yes, you do have to stand behind a sheet. They can't tell who you are. And 90 violin players show up at an audition, and only one's going to get picked.
Yeah.
That's competition.
Yeah.
That's
so
stress.
Obviously there is still music education, even though it might create a little bit of a better environment for some students, it could end up doing the opposite. And educators have to be careful in choosing their approach. Do we want to create this stress or we don't? Is that correct?
I will tell you some programs are competitive. The program at Upper St. Clair where I taught is not a competition band. We didn't have a competition orchestra and had the doors open for anyone. And you know that for South Hills Junior Orchestra, you don't have to be taking private lessons for 10 years in order to be able to come, and there are no auditions to participate. It's not for everyone. Some school programs, they have an advanced ensemble that requires that you audition to get into, and others it's based on seniority. So I am a freshman, I'm in the low band, and now I'm a junior or a senior, I'm in the higher band. It's just because I got older. You know, my chronological age, I'm supposed to be smarter just because I'm older. I know Upper St. Clair had an advanced jazz ensemble that you had to try out, and if the teacher didn't think you met the criteria, you might never make it.
Yeah. So. All right, so we're going to take just a quick short break. We'll be back with more in a couple of minutes on the Welcome back to today's edition of The Edge, where I am joined by former music educator, Mr. Paul Fox.
Hi.
So before the break, we talked a little bit about some of the benefits of music education, helping students to develop. Can you elaborate a little bit on creativity? It's such, and you had talked earlier about right brain versus left brain. Creativity, it's obviously more of a right brain kind of thing. And you see when students are involved in music education, they have a much higher chance of just being creative and expressing themselves. Can you elaborate on all of that?
Schools are arranged in one right answers. You know, you go to all your subjects, there will be one right answer. If you do it wrong, there's a big red mark on that answer. Like 1 + 1 + 1. What's that equal? 3. No. 111. No. 01 plus 01 plus 01 might be 11. And the one I always love teasing students is 1 + 1 + 1 is the Roman numeral 1. So 1 + 1 + 1 is 1. Those are right answers. So music and creativity, you don't have one answer. You are divergent of all your answers. You could have a lot of different things in there. Music, of course, you do have to read notes. And you know you can't play your snare drum roll on the third beat when I told you you have to be on the first beat. That's math, and that's yes or no. Did he do it wrong? But also you have to deal with interpretation. You have to make phrasing. You have to express what sounds like it's coming alive, what's getting louder, what's getting softer. And you have all these little tools like buttons, get louder, softer, accent. And those are things that you as a musician have to develop, and that's creativity. Also, if you're so lucky to be in a jazz ensemble or to sing in a jazz choir or sing a piece that's American jazz, you'll have an opportunity to improvise, to create on the spot. That's creativity. Basically, a conductor might stand up and say, I want you all to start and stop at the same time. But even if you're just one clarinet player in that band, you have to put your feeling into that instrument to make it a meaningful experience for you as well as the audience. My favorite guru about creativity, and I recommend everyone going and finding this TED Talks. The gentleman's name is Sir Ken Robinson, and I think he's the most viewed video on TED Talks. Something like 18 million people have seen his speeches, and he's done multitude of them. He is kind of amazing because, first of all, he's an Englishman, and he has that English humor, and he's just fun to listen to. But he will go out on a limb and say that schools are killing creativity. Not in the music classroom, but they're saying in many classrooms, you sit there and you go, oh, okay, I got to do my homework and I got to do the one answer. And I know you feel that way on some of your subjects. It's not fair to the teachers in this building, for example. They are creative teachers. But I can tell you for a fact that he will show studies that say the longer you're in school, the less creative you become. They can ask a first grader, here's my new invention. It looks like a paperclip. What do you think I could use this for? And they might come up with 300 answers. Because first of all, it hasn't been, no, that's not the right answer. No, that's not what we use paperclips for. No, you can't say that, all right? Even English teachers have to put red circles around what you write, you know? No, no, no. Well, this first grader might say, you know, that's really cool. If it's hollow, I could put my M&Ms in there. Or if it's a styrofoam, I could use it as a flotation device. Now, everybody could laugh. Of course, they're not writing this, they're saying this. By the time you're in 6th grade, you're lucky if you can come up with 50 uses of a paperclip and you even know what it is. And when you're my age, they'll say it's for clipping paper. So one of the reasons that I'm really into what he's talking about, he talks about a girl that was in class, I think in 1st grade, and she was coloring outside the lines. Bad. Even the art teacher might say that's bad, right? She was fidgety. She was constantly wiggling. And they were like, oh, come on. You've got to sit still. You're disturbing the students next to you in art class, in regular class. Finally, the teacher says, she calls the parents in. I need you to go get this girl tested. I think she's sick. I think there's something wrong. She might need some kind of drugs to dumb her down a little bit, to make her calmer. So they took her, thank goodness, to a really good psychologist, or maybe it was a psychiatrist. And the guy did a battery of tests on this little girl. 1st grade. And then the parents came back to visit, and he calls them in, and he says to the girl, listen, would you sit there? I'll be back. I'm going to turn the music on. We're going to take a few minutes to talk with your parents. And then they go into a room next to the room of his office and open up a one-way glass window. And they looked in to see the girl. And she starts doing dancing. She starts moving. There she goes. She's fidgeting. The psychologist turns to the parents and says, your daughter's not sick. She's a dancer. She interprets intelligence with movement. Her idea of learning is with movement. Don't give her drugs. Take her to a dance school. Take her to a school that has movement as a part of their curriculum. The long story short, I just mentioned the name Gillian Lynn. She was the choreographer for Cats and for Phantom of the Opera on Broadway. Multi-millionaire, one of the richest women in the world before she passed. I believe she passed fairly recently, 2018. And she was with Weber and Rice, all the biggies in Broadway. She wanted to move. When she walked into that first day in a school that dealt with that intelligence, movement, creative movement, guess what? She started succeeding like you wouldn't believe and became one of the greatest dance choreographers we ever know. You ought to see this video because Sir Ken says, we may have just taken that little kid in 1st grade and given him drugs to get him to sit in his seat. I think school is absolutely essential to have the arts so that students find their voice, their feelings, and maybe it's one of those, Howard Gardner wrote a book called The Multiple Intelligences. Maybe it's one of those 9 intelligences that isn't reading, isn't listening. Like, I don't know if you take notes when you're in history. Some people have to hear it, see it, and write it. Okay, I don't know if they call that psychomotor or what that is. Kinesthetic, I think is what this area. Music is an intelligence. Have to have it in the schools.
I would agree. Now, before we go here, a few more questions. Can you touch a little bit on what do you think your most rewarding experience was as a music educator in seeing a student succeed because of music that wouldn't otherwise? You touched on that girl that went to dancing school, maybe something a little bit more personal that was one of your own students.
Well, I have to tell you, their whole gang of students, when you know the aha moment happens, it's the greatest thing there is, where you're looking at their eyes and you see they're frustrated. You should see the movie, Mr. Holland's Opus. There was a clarinet player in that movie, who every time she got up close to the upper part of the notes, she squeaked and she started crying. And Mr. Holland was the music teacher, and she's, I'm quitting clarinet, I'm not doing this anymore. Well, I've had, I don't know how many of those I've had in my career, 100 of them, where I looked at their eyes and you could see, oh, I can do it. And that moment almost makes you want to cry, because maybe they had a lot of unsuccess, maybe they have a bad home life, maybe they have been told they're dumb, maybe they have really not succeeded in school. And then you put them into a concert, and there they are up on stage, and you look at them and they are succeeding, whether it's musical or band, orchestra, course, all that. I can't name all the students I saw that aha moment. I've seen it in the Hills Junior Orchestra, kids who say, I can't do this, and then they do a whole concert of music that's hard. So that is probably the greatest realization. And now I'm retired, and I walk up to the mall, I go to a restaurant, and I'm walking in and say, Mr. Fox, and people come who are parents now. You were the single most enjoyable class I ever had. You know, I've heard this over and over again. I thank them, I blush and all that, but it's like they remember the musicals or the concerts or the classes we had in music. They don't remember that science test you had second period. So.
I would agree, and even myself, I can relate to that. I considered quitting band at several times throughout my career in elementary, middle school, high school, to focus more on academics, and because the situations weren't ideal, but I persevered, I stuck through it, and now would I ever consider quitting high school band again? Absolutely not.
Well, you contribute to our orchestra. You found out that the people next to you, some of them are very young. When
They
we
are.
have a 8-year-old or something like that next to you who plays bass drum and you're playing snare.
Yeah, and it's a good learning experience for
I
them.
mean, he was like petrified, right? But you're not. We also have, you're not in this situation, we also have students in the school system that might turn to at-risk behaviors. And I know I've had over the years students that we always had to watch, but we got them involved in marching band or in musicals, and somehow they were so darn busy, they weren't able to spend their free time hanging around with probably negative influences. Yeah. We don't have that issue. I know I didn't have that issue with musicals, and we don't have that issue with marching band. And sometimes kids slip off and do things they're not supposed to do.
Yeah.
Back in my day, the kids would go around behind the stadium and smoke, you know, and that was like, oh, you'll be suspended from school, that sort of thing. I was too busy. I was in all these band practices and orchestra practices and musicals. There's no time to do negative things. Also, you make a family. It's called a musical family.
Yeah, and that kind of gives you some security.
It does. And
all right. Yeah. So thank you, Mr. Fox, for being on the show today.
Thank you, Sam.
Offering your insight and everything. I hope you guys can kind of see the benefit and importance of music education in our schools more now than you did 30 minutes ago at the start of our program. Obviously, it's something we should strive to keep here in our communities and across the nation and even across the globe moving forward. So once again, thanks, Mr. Fox, for being on the show today and offering us your perspective. And thank you all for tuning in to today's episode of The Edge. I hope to see you all next time.